back, Left Reckoners. I'm Matt Leck, standing in alone without David Griscom today. With me, though, is the internet's busiest music nerd, Anthony Fantano of the Needle Drop. Anthony was actually a guest on the old Michael Brooks show. Folks might want to go revisit that from
Yeah,
back
a
in the day.
while ago, so long ago.
Hear about Anthony's Bush era sort of political origin, or even around that time. But today we're going to talk about some politics. I do have a semi-relevant thing regarding Rick Rubin and if he's alt-right. But I actually want to talk to Anthony about what's really been on my mind these last few weeks, and that is the Kendrick Lamar diss verse on the Future track. Like that, right? That was Like That. Yep.
Yeah.
And I have to say, like, I'll just put my cards on the table because I'm kind of in and out on music generally. I was telling this to you. But hip hop has always been my favorite. But what I realized in the last few weeks is like I'm really into hip hop when it gets competitive and egos are on the line. Like the old 50 Cent Ja Rule stuff was kind of formative for me. Even Kendrick's Control thing. Even actually, the thing that impressed me most about Drake is his back-to-back kind of non-denial about ghostwriting. So I'm curious, am I wrong? Am I what's wrong that I start paying attention when this starts going on, Anthony?
No, I wouldn't say it's wrong per se. How old are you again?
I'm 35.
You're 30. Okay, so you're around the same age as me. I mean, you came up during an era where like beefs were a part of regular hip hop lore. That was like, you know, a part of the culture regularly. And when beefs happened, they had consequences in terms of like, you know, long-term perception of, you know, an artist's career. You know, I'm thinking like Jay-Z Nas and how, you know, Jay-Z coming out of that mostly unscathed and looking like the victor for as long as it went on, definitely painted the super successful trajectory that he, you know, sort of like launched off into post that. Meanwhile, Nas, like, while he is like, you know, very much back on his feet and he's had those great records with Hit Boy, and, you know, he's obviously like, you know, earned some Grammy wins and nods that are very much deserved. And his back catalog is very much seen as classic at this point. For a long time after, like a lot of the records that he put out were not well viewed, not well, you know, reviewed, have sort of like, you know, it's like he has this forgotten era in the middle of his catalog. And it's only been until the 2010s that he's kind of like bounced back. And, you know, when he did that record with Kanye, and again, when he was working with Hit Boy and people have been kind of like paying attention to him again, he's like more regularly in conversations, not just as a veteran artist who put out classic stuff back in the day, but like as a living artist who's still putting out good stuff. There's that, you know, you just mentioned 50 Cent. One of the last more consequential rap beefs that I can think of was actually 50 Cent Kanye, when Kanye challenged him to sell more in the head-to-head on release day or release week when he was coming out with Graduation. And 50 Cent was coming out with the record that he did that I can't even remember at this point. That record flopped so hard, and so did every other album afterwards. And 50 Cent kind of fell off the radar at that point. And, you know, as you sort of say, like the 50 Cent Ja Rule beef was also very consequential, and that Ja Rule was taken a lot less seriously after that whole ordeal. But these days, like the rap beefs that we see and have been seeing, the consequences in terms of like, you know, the success from an artist from that point forward, they're not really there. You know, Drake has been allowed to just kind of continue as if, you know, he's been completely unscathed by the whole Pusha T thing. The only person who brings up that instance or references back to her, the person bringing it up the most in their own songs, is actually Drake. Like Pusha T's last record didn't really touch down on that as many times as Drake's did. But, you know, the thing is like, a part of Drake's appeal or a part of his overall narrative is like how many people sort of like have it out for him. And he sort of likes to bring that up quite a bit, even if it doesn't really have, again, sort of like long-term consequences for his success. Other instances that I could think of are like the recent head-to-head that Nicki Minaj had with Megan Thee Stallion. Nicki came out of that looking very foolish, dropped one of the worst diss tracks in recent memory that, you know, objective, you know, fans could think of. But Nicki's career is still very much intact. all of her promises and threats to drop subsequent songs and dishes and attacks have been pretty much forgotten, and she hasn't been, and nobody's been holding her feet to the fire on sort of like coming through with that. And I feel like we're kind of seeing a similar thing with this Kendrick and Cole, to do at the moment as well, because, Cole didn't even give this track a whole week to breathe before he was literally at a live show apologizing for putting it out. And I don't know if J. Cole's fans are going to turn on him as a result of that. I think he's just going to continue forward. I think Kendrick's just going to continue forward. Again, I don't blame you for kind of like noting this and paying attention to it. It's what a lot of people pay attention. It's drama, it's tension, it's whatever. And we come from an era when that was like, really pivotal and a part of hip hop's general lore. But I feel like the diss record, the beef record, as like I want to say like a tool, I think it's kind of like it's irrelevant at this point, because it doesn't really have kind of the actual quantifiable impact on an artist's career that it used to, in terms of making it or breaking it. Even if, like, again, in that Drake Pushes instance, like, you're totally left, like, falling flat on your face. And on top of it, like, the beefs don't really seem to last all that long anyway. Again, J. Cole, apology, ended it. It's gone. Nicki Minaj, as soon as she put out her awful track and there were repercussions for it, she ignored it, forgot about it, just stopped talking about it. Eminem keeps going at Benzino, and it's absolutely pitiful because he's beating a dead horse at this point, because there's nothing really Benzino can do or say that'll sort of like, really take him down or do anything to hurt him back. I'm just, these beefs. And again, with the Drake Pusha thing, Drake literally ended that shit with a press release. And put out a piece of paper, a statement being like, oh, we think this went too far, we're just going to end it now. It's like how, like, prior to that, you couldn't possibly name another rap beef that ended in a PR, like letter sent out to the press. And again, I can't really think of another rap beef that ended in the responder apologizing as soon as they put out the response. I think this current generation, and not that this isn't like sort of a boomer argument here, but I think like this current generation doesn't really have the stomach for that kind of like long, unending, multi-track sort of like feud that we used to see back in the day. And I don't think that's inherently a bad thing. Like I feel like ultimately it would be more tragic if, these sort of tensions rose and rose and rose to the point where, we saw people getting killed. We saw violence, obviously that would be worse. That would be a worse outcome. I feel like, but not only that, but I feel like another reason that we're not like, really seeing any hunger for this kind of prolonged sort of tension is like there's not really any necessity for it anymore in the current hip hop landscape. It used to be back in the day when hip hop was not sort of like, the top genre, that there was a limited pool of resources in terms of like listeners and, media time and radio time and, DJs playing your shit and so on and so forth. And the thing is like, you needed to compete in order to sort of prove yourself worthy of those slots, worthy of those spots, worthy of the album contract, worthy of the anything. And the thing is like these days, you don't even have to be good, to like get a record contract and have a number one song and so on and so forth. Like, none of these rappers are coming up kind of, having their metal tested battle rapping in front of each other in order to make a living. In fact, like, that part of the culture is so separate from what we know as the mainstream right now. Battle rap is its own thing. You have battle rap, you have battle rappers who make a living or try to make a living battle rapping, and it's often more of a hindrance than it is a help for you to be a battle rapper professionally and try to make a transition into the commercial world. Like, I'm going to start making commercial records as a battle rapper. Usually we don't see a whole lot of crossover between those lanes these days. And one of the last and greatest, rappers to ever make that transition was probably Eminem. Eminem came up as a battle rapper and then obviously, transitioned into making commercial music and ended up being one of the most successful. And, maybe a more recent example would be Meek Mill. But the thing is, in today's hip hop landscape, even he is more of the exception than the rule. Tierra Whack as well. She's from Philly too, but she seems to be pretty focused these days on experimenting with other genres other than rap, and there's like really no trace of her talents and capabilities as a battle rapper or as somebody who can rap competitively in a lot of her work, especially this new record, which is like very introspective and very much about kind of like diving into very dark feelings of depression and all of that. And I think that paradigm shift has come for a lot of reasons. It's partially it's partially changed because of guys like Drake, because of guys like J. Cole, because of guys like Kendrick, because some of the biggest and most popular and most, successful commercial works of these artists are not them sort of like, going at each other's throats or at the throats of other rappers, but them rapping about like what's torturing them. Oh, it's my ex-girlfriend. Oh, it's my drinking problem. Oh, it's my depression. Oh, it's like my imposter syndrome. Oh, it's like, this void that is left within me as I've kind of reached the top of success in the music industry. And now I don't really know what to do with myself. And I thought this would make me happy, and it doesn't,
Right.
So, it only makes sense that, you would see artists at the top, but also, at this kind of like mid-tier underground range, not finding ways to sort of like tear their competition apart, but figuring out ways to emote more intensely in their music, or make something that's just going to be the hookiest earworm that you could possibly come up with. So yeah, while I think beef may not be going anywhere anytime soon, is sort of like an idea, something that we like allude to. Like obviously, I don't think rappers are going to stop writing bars about people who hate them and people who count them out and people who sort of underrate them or disrespect them anytime soon. But, I think we're completely past the era where, we're going to see, multi-song disses going back and forth over and over and over and over, especially among artists who are in the mainstream. The only sort of corner of hip hop that I can think of right now that is regularly engaging in that for prolonged periods of time, multiple tracks, is probably the drill scene. And those dudes are literally fucking firing at each other. Those dudes are literally unloading clips on each other. And again, there's like, real life consequences
Right.
for that stuff every day, every week, every month, every year. And I'm sure that, in the backs of some of these rappers' heads, like, they know on some level that things probably could be taken that far, if they decided to, I'm going to respond in this way and I'm going to respond in this way and I'm going to drag it out for months and weeks and this long or whatever, so ultimately it may not even really be worth it, because at the end of the day, for a guy like Drake, for a guy like J. Cole, doing a diss record, it's not gonna, if it does anything to their career positive, it may bring them 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 million more Spotify listeners. And at the end of the day, like, that doesn't mean 2 to 3 to 4 or $5 million in their pocket. You know what I mean? And even if it was that amount of money going in their pocket, would it even be worth it then? Because these dudes are looking at the potential to continue doing this hip hop thing at the level that they are for the next maybe 5 to 10 years, considering the success that they've had up until this point. Like, they're going to make way more money doing that long term than they are sort of like focusing on, the immediacy of this quarrel, this beef, this fight, this whatever that's in front of them right now.
Yeah, as I've listened to it more, I realize how much more this is less, and you tell me, but a sort of revitalization of that sort of era and more maybe a last gasp. Like even the Eazy-E sample, "He was once a thug from around the way," that was used on Riding Spinners. Like, it seems very aimed at me as a 35-year-old that likes that era of stuff, and it's interesting because that. Like, I know J. Cole because Kendrick was featured. I'm a Kendrick guy. Like, I remember him,
Yeah.
that early era. A Good Kid, Mad City was the first one I anticipated and listened to. And to me, and like, I'm 35, so I'm not listening for it like I was in my 20s. But like, Kendrick was sort of foretold as the guy he became. And so his verse now, it impressed me way more than even the Control verse did, which I think was I think is only notable in the way that Drake responded to it, because I thought it was kind of, let's go guys, we're all like competing like it's together. Whereas this was more, I think Kendrick And then I want to talk about J. Cole a bit too, but Kendrick's saying like, look, like he can have all that success. And I'll be honest, I haven't been listening to a lot of Drake over the past years. I'm still Kendrick Lamar, and even if you don't like the introspective stuff, like I can still go there in a way that these guys can't. And like we know kind of about Drake. The J. Cole stuff is interesting to me because like I never have really listened to J. Cole outside of a Kendrick context, outside of the early features, but it was that made me respect J. Cole, and I was surprised by how sort of ready people were for his response. People kind of dismissed the idea Drake would have a big response. But I was impressed, frankly, by how sort of, because it's frankly like just not being as familiar, I class Kendrick higher than them. And I thought J. Cole's response wasn't actually super bad. I don't think it was great. I think it was kind of like rehashing similar themes, like going through the albums and rating them that people do on diss tracks. But I think it kept the ball in the air, and then he apologized for it.
Right. No, I think a lot of people were excited because, and to your point again, like weren't expecting much from Drake because, in recent memory, we do again have that Pusha T thing. If Drake were to respond in kind to Kendrick or, in an even more pronounced way with an entire 2 tracks or a couple tracks in the same way that he did Meek Mill, there is the chance that things would escalate to the point where he would put out another PR statement and be like, okay, things have gotten too crazy. We're just going to back off. It's over. I mean, I feel like Drake, as much as he does reference that beef over and over and how, I'm going to get revenge one day, like the Scorpio that he is. I think, at the end of the day, I feel like that's the ultimate lesson that he took away from that whole thing. That my career and making money and being successful is more important than any of these, sort of like back and forths. However, with Cole, a lot of people see Cole as kind of like I don't personally, but a lot of people see Cole as kind of like a kindred spirit to Kendrick Lamar. Back in the day when they were both coming up, there was like this long rumored, and both of them I think had even referenced it at one point, like this long rumored project where they were going to collab for an entire tape or an entire album. Like, after a while, like people kind of gave up hope on it. I think it was even maybe formally announced at one point that it just like wasn't going to happen. But, people have kind of seen them as kind of creatively similar to each other because they both make introspective music that's kind of cerebral and heady and addresses social issues, and they're both lyrical and they're both passionate, and they're both like guys who are kind of in their own heads. And but personally I don't think they're that similar, as they both continue to sort of like release albums that I think diverge even further from each other artistically, but still I think there are a lot of people that have memories of that time and memories of that era, and to think that like as far as the commercial side of the very top spots of hip hop go, like J. Cole is probably one of the only artists who could contend with Kendrick Lamar lyrically. And I think on some level that is true. However, I think it was pretty clear from J. Cole's response that we didn't get the best performance because he wasn't actually enthusiastic about doing what he did on that track, and his performance, his delivery, and his writing wasn't as good as it typically is on songs where he clearly does have drive and does have an interest in doing what he does, be that on a song like Johnny P's Caddy, or be that like on First Person Shooter, or be that even on like False Prophets, which if you're unfamiliar with the J. Cole catalog, is a diss record in and of itself, but it's a diss record about Kanye. But it's not like your typical diss record. It's more of like, and this was years and years ago. This is like a record where he's kind of like unpacking the idea of Kanye as sort of like a leader, a messiah of hip hop, somebody who, you sort of like have faith in, who you believe in, but simultaneously he's deeply flawed and he has a lot of problems and he's hypocritical and you can't really trust him to follow through with anything. You don't really know if anything that he's saying, anything that's coming out of his mouth has any factual basis, and you just kind of end up, extremely disappointed in the guy. So that's a diss record that he is actually incredibly well written and well put together, and actually kind of dissects Kanye in a very effective way. But it's not like, it's kind of different in tone because it's not like aggressively seeking a response from him. You know what I mean? It's just like, this is my observation on the guy and his inability to sort of like keep it together. So it's like J. Cole has the capacity when he wants to pull somebody apart, but part of his motivation was there because he obviously looked up to the guy. It wasn't like I'm going to go at him because he's my competition. I'm kind of going at him because I looked up at him. A lot of J. Cole's early work is obviously, J. Cole not just a rapper, but as a rapper producer as well, looked up to him and, kind of dissected him from that point of view, from somebody who admired him and then became, sort of disillusioned with him. Again, he has the capacity to break somebody down when he wants to, but in this case, I just don't think he really wanted to. So, we kind of got the results that we did.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty interesting. Like, you got dragged out into part of the. I'm curious how Kendrick, if he's just going to leave it there or and just say like, I guess I took care of that.
I don't know if there's really any reason for him to add anything to this. I mean, frankly, like I'm not surprised, but at least from my perspective, like the line initially he was responding to from J. Cole, the big three thing,
Right.
I mean, was a positive citation of him coming from J. Cole, even though I can acknowledge that, like, he's won this round, but simultaneously, like, that was kind of a dick move. There was like really no impetus for you to attack the guys in that way. I mean, here and there might have, been some shots from Drake in the past because there is, definitely tension there between these two different sections of hip hop, where you have artists that are just like kind of in it for the charts and are in it for, the commercial appeal, like Drake, and artists who are obviously trying to make something more substantive, like Kendrick. Kendrick kind of going at Cole inadvertently or, inadvertently in that way is kind of like friendly fire a little bit, because like even if I do agree with the sentiment that like Kendrick typically makes better albums than Cole, like he's still trying, you know what I mean? Like he's not exactly out here just like trying to make garbage, radio records or just albums that are going to sound good on Rap Caviar, he's actually trying his best to make something substantive, and he clearly admires you. It's like, I don't know if you need to like fucking throw him under the bus like that. It was a bit of a throw him under the bus kind of moment, and the thing is, like, I feel like if J. Cole kind of came out like he did this past weekend, rather than doing a response track, it might have left Kendrick, looking like a bit of a dick, because it is kind of true. J. Cole has done nothing to sort of like, warrant that kind of response. He hasn't been going at Kendrick. Like, he clearly loves the guy's work. And, I was kind of amazed that Kendrick ended up coming out of this looking like, a total winner, despite the fact that like he really kind of aggressed out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And not even in a way, the control verse that you mentioned earlier, while he did name a lot of names in that verse, like it did at least a little bit sort of like seem like in the competition of in the spirit of competition with my generation. Like I'm mentioning these guys. See, the difference in tone there is like he's clearly mentioning those guys because he sees them as his competition, and he sees like, while he does in his heart of hearts feel like he can outdo them and he has the potential to sort of like clear all of them out, like he also sees them, and if he, as a threat on some level. If he didn't, I don't think he would have named them. Meanwhile, in the Big Three verse, he's literally like, no, you guys are nowhere the fuck near me. I am in my own lane. I'm in my own category. Like, don't even mention my name. Yeah. It's like, wow.
And
okay.
It goes so perfectly.
That's like a totally different Kendrick.
It goes so perfectly with the theme of the Future album too. I love that they did that with all like the claustrophobic leading right into it.
Right. No, for sure.
Okay, so I want to.